There was a moment when I sat in silence, staring at my bank account, feeling that same weight in my chest that I had been carrying for months, maybe even years, that quiet frustration that doesn't scream but slowly eats at you from the inside. And I remember thinking, God, why does this keep happening to me? Because I had been praying, I had been asking, I had been trying to do things right, at least from my perspective, and yet nothing seemed to change. The numbers didn't improve, the pressure didn't go away, and the cycle just kept repeating itself over and over again, like I was trapped in something I couldn't escape. And maybe you've felt this too. Maybe you've had those nights where you lie in bed, thinking about your bills, your responsibilities, the money you owe, the things you wish you could fix but can't, and you whisper a prayer, hoping that somehow something will shift, hoping that God will step in and remove the burden, because that's what we believe, right? That if we ask, He will provide, that if we trust, things will get better. But what happens when you trust and nothing changes? What happens when you pray and the situation stays exactly the same? That's where I was, stuck between faith and frustration, believing in God, but also quietly questioning why my life didn't reflect the breakthrough I was expecting. And I didn't say it out loud, but deep down there was a thought growing inside me, a dangerous one. The kind of thought that makes you feel guilty just for having it. God, are you even listening? And if this resonates with you, if you've ever felt this tension between believing and struggling, just type God, I trust you in the comments. Not for me, but as a reminder to yourself. Because sometimes we need to declare faith even when our reality doesn't match it. The truth is, I thought I was doing everything right. I thought the problem was external. Maybe the economy, maybe bad timing, maybe opportunities that never came. Maybe people who didn't help. I had a list of reasons, and all of them made sense. All of them justified my situation, and that's what made it even more dangerous. Because when something makes sense, you stop questioning it. But one day something shifted, not in my finances, not in my circumstances, but in my understanding. And it didn't come as a loud voice. It didn't come as a miracle. It came as a realization, quiet but undeniable. The kind of truth that once you see it, you can't unsee it. What if the reason nothing is changing is not because God is not helping you, but because there is something you are refusing to see? That question hit me harder than any financial problem ever did, because it forced me to look inward instead of outward. It forced me to consider the possibility that maybe the issue wasn't everything around me. Maybe it was something in me and I didn't like that idea. Because it's much easier to blame circumstances than to examine yourself. It's easier to say I don't have enough than to ask, what am I doing with what I already have? It's easier to wait for a miracle than to confront your habits. But that day I couldn't escape it anymore. Because deep down I knew something wasn't aligning. I knew that my prayers were sincere, but my actions, maybe they weren't. Maybe I was asking God to fix something I wasn't willing to change. And that's when everything started to make sense. Not in a comfortable way, but in a clear way. Because clarity doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like a mirror, showing you something you've been avoiding for a long time. I started to realize that I had been asking God for increase, while ignoring the way I was managing what I already had. I had been praying for breakthrough while repeating the same decisions that kept me stuck. I wanted different results, but I was living the same patterns. And here's the part that changed everything for me. God is not just interested in giving you more, He is interested in preparing you for more. Because if nothing changes in you, nothing can last around you. That realization was uncomfortable, but it was also the beginning of something new. Because for the first time, I stopped asking, why is this happening to me? And started asking, what is this trying to teach me? And that question changes everything. And the more I sat with that question, the harder it became to ignore what was right in front of me. Because it's one thing to feel stuck, but it's another thing to realize you might be the reason you're stuck. And that's not something anyone wants to accept. Because it removes every excuse. It removes every external factor. It forces you to look at your own decisions, your own patterns, your own habits. And I started asking myself things I had been avoiding for a long time. Questions that didn't feel comfortable but felt necessary. What am I doing with the money I already have? How am I making decisions when it comes to spending? Am I being intentional or just reacting? Am I disciplined or just hoping things will work out? And the answers weren't what I wanted them to be. Because if I'm being honest, I realized I wasn't lacking income as much as I was lacking control. I wasn't lacking opportunities as much as I was lacking discipline. And that changes everything, because once you see that, you can't go back to blaming everything else. And this is where it gets even deeper. Because this isn't just about money. This is about alignment. This is about whether your life reflects the principles you say you believe in. Because it's easy to pray. It's easy to ask God for help. It's easy to say you trust Him. But trust is not proven in what you say. It's proven in what you do consistently, especially when no one is watching. Especially in the small decisions that seem insignificant, but actually define your direction. And I had to face the reality that I was asking God to bless habits that were keeping me stuck. I was asking for increase while living in inconsistency. I was asking for breakthrough while ignoring responsibility. And then I remembered something that changed the way I see everything. A principle that is simple but uncomfortable, found in Luke 16:10, where it says that whoever is faithful with little will also be faithful with much. And whoever is dishonest with little will also be dishonest with much. And when you really think about that, it's not just a nice verse. It's a law, it's a pattern, it's a standard. Because God is not guessing if you're ready for more, He is observing what you do with what you already have. And that realization hit me in a way I wasn't expecting, because it meant that my current situation wasn't random. It was a reflection. It was showing me something about myself that I hadn't fully accepted. I started to see that every small financial decision I made was either building trust or breaking it. Not just with money, but with responsibility, because money is just a tool. But the way you handle it reveals your mindset, your discipline, your priorities, and even your level of obedience. And this is where most people miss it, because they focus on the amount instead of the management. They focus on wanting more instead of becoming better. And God doesn't operate like that. He doesn't reward desire alone. He responds to alignment. He responds to consistency. He responds to a heart that is willing to steward what it has before asking for what it doesn't. And if you're listening to this right now, I want you to be honest with yourself. Not with me, not with anyone else, but with yourself. Are you managing what you have, or are you just hoping for more? Are you being intentional with your decisions, or are you letting emotions control your actions? Are you applying the principles you already know, or are you ignoring them and expecting a different outcome? Because this is where the shift begins. Not when your income changes, but when your awareness changes. When you stop looking outward and start looking inward. When you stop asking God to change your situation and start asking Him to change you. Because the truth is, God is not trying to limit you. He is trying to prepare you. But preparation doesn't feel like blessing. It feels like pressure. It feels like restriction. It feels like being forced to confront things you would rather ignore. And that's exactly where I was. Realizing that my problem wasn't just financial, it was behavioral. It was internal. It was something that had been repeating itself without me fully acknowledging it. And once you see that pattern, once you recognize it, you have a choice. You can either ignore it and stay where you are, or you can face it and start changing it. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it takes time, even if it forces you to become someone different. And that's the moment where everything begins to shift. Not outside, but inside. Because before anything changes in your life, something has to change in you, and most people skip that part. They want results without transformation. They want blessing without responsibility. They want change without discomfort. But it doesn't work like that, and deep down, you already know it. You felt it, you've seen it, you've experienced it. The question is not whether it's true. The question is whether you're willing to accept it. And once you begin to see that pattern, once you accept that something inside you needs to change, you start noticing things you ignored before. Small decisions that seemed harmless but were quietly shaping your reality. And this is where it becomes uncomfortable. Because it's no longer theoretical, it becomes personal. It becomes specific. It becomes real. And I started to recognize patterns in my own life that I had justified for so long. Patterns that didn't look like big mistakes. But when repeated over time, they kept me exactly where I was. One of them was emotional spending. That silent habit of using money as a way to feel better, to reward myself after a stressful day, to escape for a moment, to fill a space that had nothing to do with finances, but everything to do with how I was feeling. And I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that I deserved it, that it was just a small expense. But those small expenses added up, not just in money, but in mindset. Because every time I acted without intention, I reinforced a lack of control, and over time that becomes your default. Another pattern I had to confront was inconsistency, starting with good intentions, making a plan, deciding to do better but not sustaining it, being disciplined for a few days, maybe a week, and then going back to old habits. And that cycle is dangerous because it creates the illusion of progress without actual change. It makes you feel like you're trying, but in reality, you're repeating the same loop. And the worst part is that you begin to normalize it. You begin to accept that this is just how things are, that you're someone who tries but never fully changes. And that belief becomes part of your identity. And then there was something even deeper, something I didn't want to admit at first. A subtle form of avoidance, delaying decisions, ignoring numbers, not looking at my finances clearly, because facing them would force me to take responsibility. And it's easier to stay in uncertainty than to face a truth that requires action. But avoidance doesn't remove the problem. It only gives it time to grow. And the longer you avoid, the heavier it becomes. Until one day it feels overwhelming, not because it appeared suddenly, but because it was building quietly while you weren't paying attention. And maybe you're recognizing yourself in one of these patterns right now. Maybe it's not exactly the same. Maybe your situation looks different, but the core is similar. Repeated decisions that seem small in the moment, but create long-term consequences. Habits that feel normal, but are actually limiting you. Behaviors that you've justified so many times that you stopped questioning them. And this is where the real shift begins. Not when you discover something new, but when you finally take seriously what you already know. Because the truth is, most people don't lack knowledge, they lack application. They know they should be more disciplined. They know they should be more intentional. They know they should manage better. But knowing is not enough. Because knowledge without action creates frustration. It creates that feeling of being stuck, of understanding what to do but not doing it. And that gap between knowing and doing is where most people stay trapped. And this is where I had to be brutally honest with myself. I wasn't just dealing with a financial issue. I was dealing with a pattern of behavior, a way of thinking, a lack of consistency that was affecting everything. Not just my money, but my discipline, my focus, my ability to follow through. And once you see that, you realize that fixing your finances is not just about numbers. It's about becoming someone different. Someone who can be trusted with more. Someone who doesn't act based on emotion but on intention. Someone who understands that every decision has a direction, even if it seems small. There's another principle that made this even clearer for me. Something written in Proverbs 21:5, which says that the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance. But everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. And when you think about that, it's not just talking about effort. It's talking about consistency. It's talking about patience. It's talking about intentional action over time. And that's where many of us fail, not because we don't want better, but because we want it faster than we're willing to build it. We want results without process. We want change without discipline. And that disconnect keeps us stuck. So the question is not just what are you asking God for? The real question is, what patterns are you repeating while you ask? Because if those patterns don't change, the outcome won't change. And this is where it becomes your responsibility, not in a negative way, but in an empowering way. Because once you accept that your actions matter, you also realize that you have the ability to change them. And that means your future is not fixed. It's shaped by what you decide to do next. And that's where things begin to shift. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because you're no longer blind to what's been holding you back. You start seeing clearly, and clarity, even when it's uncomfortable, is the beginning of transformation. And this is where everything begins to shift, not when your situation suddenly improves, not when money appears out of nowhere, but when you make a decision, a real decision, not based on emotion, not based on temporary motivation, but based on clarity, the kind of decision that changes the way you think, the way you act, the way you respond to situations. Because once you see the pattern, once you understand what has been holding you back, you can't keep living the same way and expect a different outcome. And this is the moment where most people hesitate, because change sounds simple, but it requires something most people avoid. Consistency, discipline, responsibility, and above all, honesty with yourself. I had to make a choice. Either I keep repeating the same cycle and hoping for a different result, or I take ownership of what I can control and start doing things differently, even if it feels uncomfortable at first, even if it doesn't bring immediate results, even if no one notices, because real change is not loud. It's not dramatic, it's quiet. It's built in the small decisions you make every day, the choices no one sees, the moments where you could go back to your old habits, but choose not to. And that's where transformation begins. Not in one big action, but in many small, consistent ones. I started with something simple but powerful: awareness. Actually looking at my finances without avoiding them, without excuses, without emotional filters, just facts, numbers, reality, because you cannot change what you refuse to see. And that alone was a shift, because instead of reacting to my situation, I started understanding it. And when you understand something, you gain control over it, not instantly, but progressively, step by step. Decision by decision, then came discipline. And this is where it gets real. Because discipline is not about doing what feels good. It's about doing what is right, even when you don't feel like it. It's about choosing long-term stability over short-term comfort. It's about saying no to things that don't align with your direction, even if they seem small, even if they seem harmless. Because every small decision is either reinforcing your old pattern or building a new one. And once you understand that, you realize that nothing is neutral. Everything is moving you in a direction. And this is where another principle became clear. Something written in Proverbs 13:11, which says that wealth gained quickly will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. And this changes your perspective completely, because it removes the expectation of instant results. It shifts your focus from fast outcomes to consistent growth. It reminds you that real stability is built over time, not overnight, and that requires patience, something that doesn't come naturally when you feel pressure, when you feel urgency, when you want things to change now. But patience is not passive, patience is active. It's consistent action over time. It's showing up every day, making better decisions, even when the results are not visible yet, trusting that what you are building internally will eventually reflect externally. And that's where faith becomes real, not just in what you say, but in what you do repeatedly. Because faith without action is incomplete, and action without consistency doesn't create change. I also had to change something deeper, my identity, because as long as you see yourself as someone who is bad with money, someone who always struggles, someone who never gets ahead, you will unconsciously act in alignment with that identity. You will repeat the same patterns because they feel familiar. because they feel like who you are, and breaking that requires more than behavior change. It requires a shift in how you see yourself. You are not someone who is stuck. You are someone who is learning. You are not someone who always fails. You are someone who is adjusting. You are not someone who can't change. You are someone who hasn't committed fully yet. And this is where everything starts to align. Your actions begin to match your intentions. Your discipline begins to reflect your desire for change. Your decisions start to move you in a different direction. Not instantly, not perfectly, but consistently. And that consistency is what creates momentum. And momentum is what eventually creates results. Because the truth is, God is not waiting to bless a version of you that doesn't exist yet. He is shaping you into someone who can sustain what you're asking for. And that process requires participation. It requires you to show up, to act, to apply what you already know, to stop waiting for the perfect moment and start using the moment you have right now. And that's where everything changes, not because your situation magically improves overnight, but because you are no longer the same person making the same decisions. You are someone who sees clearly, acts intentionally, and understands that every step forward, no matter how small, is breaking the cycle that once kept you stuck. And when you reach this point, when you stop running from the truth and start embracing it, something inside you becomes different, not perfect, not finished, but aware, intentional, aligned in a way you weren't before. And that changes how you see everything, because now you understand that your situation was never just about money. It was about growth, it was about preparation. It was about becoming someone who can handle what you've been asking for. And that realization doesn't break you. It builds you. It gives you clarity. It gives you direction. It gives you something most people are still searching for without even realizing it. Because think about it. What if the delay you've been frustrated about was actually protection? What if the lack you've been complaining about was actually preparation? What if God was not withholding from you, but teaching you, shaping you, guiding you in a way that doesn't always feel comfortable, but is necessary? Because if you receive something before you are ready, you don't just risk losing it, you guarantee it. And that's something most people don't want to hear, but deep down, it makes sense. Because we've all experienced moments where we weren't ready for what we had. Moments where we lost opportunities, not because they were taken from us, but because we couldn't sustain them. And this is where your relationship with God becomes real. Not just in what you ask, but in what you accept. Because it's easy to trust God when things are going well. But true trust is revealed when things are not changing. When the answers don't come immediately. When the process feels slow. When you are forced to grow instead of being rescued. And that's where faith is no longer just a word. It becomes a decision. A daily choice to believe that there is purpose even in the pressure, that there is direction even in the delay, that there is meaning even when things don't make sense yet. There is something written in Ecclesiastes 3:1 that says there is a time for everything, a season for every activity under the heavens. And when you truly understand that, you stop fighting the process and start aligning with it. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this preparing me for? And that shift in perspective changes everything, because now you are no longer stuck. You are in a process. You are not being ignored. You are being developed. And maybe right now you're still in that place. Maybe your situation hasn't changed yet. Maybe the numbers still look the same. Maybe the pressure is still there. But something inside you is different now. You see things you didn't see before. You recognize patterns you ignored before. You understand that the solution is not just external, it's internal, and that means you are no longer powerless. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer hoping for change. You are becoming the change, and that's the moment where everything truly begins. Not when your circumstances shift, but when your mindset does. When your actions begin to reflect your understanding. When your daily decisions start aligning with the person you're becoming. Because that version of you, the one who is disciplined, intentional, consistent, aligned, That version is not far away. It's built one decision at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time. So instead of asking God to remove your struggle, start asking Him to strengthen you through it. Instead of asking for immediate results, ask for clarity, for discipline, for wisdom, because those are the things that create lasting change. Those are the things that turn temporary relief into permanent transformation. And once you have that, once you become that, everything else begins to follow. And if this message resonated with you, if you felt that moment of realization, that moment where something inside you said, "This is for me," then take a second and write this in the comments. God, open my eyes, not as a phrase, but as a decision. Because awareness is the beginning of change. And once your eyes are open, you can never go back to living the same way again.